Welcome to I Hate James Dobson, a podcast about religious trauma that's really an excuse to hang out with my friend and give her religious trauma.
I have so much now.
Welcome to I Hate James Dobson. My name is Jake. I'm a former evangelical turned queer sex therapist. And today, I am thrilled to be joined by the upbeat, unforgettable, unbothered, and ultimate underdog understander, Brooke.
Wow.
Brooke, you and I are often in unison in this unique and unpredictable undertaking, and a duo that remains unbeaten.
Whoa. A double you. Oh.
Brooke, how are you?
I'm so great. How are you?
Well, spoilers from the title of this episode, we're talking about the Duggars today.
Yes, we are. I've been waiting for this my whole life.
And I binged all of Shiny Happy People last night after work. So I am both sleep deprived and am flooded with Duggar content. So
Yeah.
I'm doing great.
Heads up to the readers. I know what this episode is about, which normally I don't because we've been planning this for a long time. But in typical fashion, Jake did a lot of research. Jake watched Shiny Happy People. I think you read a whole entire Duggar book.
I read 2 books.
Oh, great.
We're only going to talk about one.
Okay. And I did nothing. You're welcome.
Remember when we first started and I would read 1 book for 2 episodes?
Yes, I do.
I might have to go back to that at some point.
Yeah. Remember when I pitched the idea of doing a Duggar episode and then still I did nothing for this?
Mm-hmm.
You're welcome.
I love what you bring to this podcast.
Charm.
Brooke, how was your summer?
So far, so great.
Uh-huh.
I'm going on vacation next week.
Amazing.
Yes. I'm going to a pool in an undisclosed location. And I have a 7-foot-long hot dog pool float.
Oh, you told me about this.
Yes. Oh, did I already talk about it on the blog? I don't know if I
No,
did.
just
Okay,
in text. We have a life outside of you. I said that to the readers as if you were children.
That was so, mean and violent. We love you, readers. Okay. Yeah, it's 7 foot long. It's incredible. My friends and I are having Year of the Hot Dog. My other friends and I are having Year of the Hot Dog. And so everything is hot dog themed this year, including pool floats.
I love that. It feels very Chicago.
Well, that's exactly right. And guess what I learned? When you have a hot dog in Chicago, you can either have a char dog, which is the Chicago style hot dog, or you can have a depression dog.
That's me.
Yeah, that's kind of like on a soggy bun. Yeah, it's not really my favorite.
No,
I like the char dogs better. And Karina and I went to the Wiener Circle the other day, so summer's really.
You had a
great.
wild time at the Wiener Circle.
Well, we sure did. We won't get into that here, but we sure did.
Sorry, the phrase "wild time at the Wiener Circle."
Wild time at the Wiener Circle was had. We got our Pride Wiener Circle t-shirts, and it was great. How's your summer going?
It's okay. It's hot.
It's so hot.
We just got some merch orders in for us, and it was a great time to buy hoodies.
I know. I put that hoodie on just to take a picture, and I was like, get it off, get it off, get it off.
It's very comfortable. I recommend it, but I also recommend it for not 100 degrees outside.
Yeah.
And now it is time for Brooke's Books,
Yes.
the part of the show where Brooke comes out and talks about books.
Yes.
Take it away, Brooke.
Brooke comes out. Bisexual.
That's orgies.
Yeah. Okay. I have 4 books to talk about today. I wrote them down.
You have notes for this?
Yeah. Yeah, I do. Yeah. Shut up. Okay. The first book, I've only read a few pages, but it's supposed to be really good. Book club is now reading a book called Wayward by Amelia Hart. It's about witches. In case people want to know, my book club does international, intergenerational family dramas. That's why we read that spider book. That's why we read a lot of the books we read. Wayward by Amelia Hart, witches. We're going to meet under a tree and we're supposed to wear fake crows. I don't know.
I love how thematic this is.
Yeah, it's really thematic. I am almost done with a very wonderful book I'm reading right now called The Friend by Sigrid Nunez. It's very good. It's very short. It's very sweet. It's about grief. It's about a woman whose friend dies and she inherits his dog. It's not a sappy, schlocky thing, though. It's very good and very well written and beautiful. So everyone read that. I'm also reading Middlemarch.
Still?
And shut up.
And Have you given up on it?
Don't worry about that. It's by George Eliot. And then the one I really wanted to talk about is that I went to see a book talk, I don't know, by Jeff Hiller, who is one of the actors from the TV show Somebody Somewhere on HBO, which if you haven't seen it, you should like rush right home and turn on your TV and watch it because it's so good. It's about like friends and gay people and fat people and awesome people and grief and all this stuff in people in Kansas and people in choirs and people struggling with their faith and people, queer people in church. And it has a lot to do with what we talk about here. And I just really couldn't recommend it highly enough. They talked about religious trauma in the show and in this book. Jeff Hiller is very funny in the show and in real life. And so his book is called Actress of a Certain Age. And he talks about getting famous after 40 and what that felt like. But in the book, he talks a lot about struggling with his faith. And that is a thing that appears in the show, too. And so for people who listen to this podcast, it occurred to me that that might be something, especially if you're a queer person, that you would be interested. Jake, I thought you might be interested in it, too.
Yeah, I've never heard of this.
Yeah. Somebody Somewhere on HBO is like a beautiful, it's a quiet sort of show, but it's really beautiful and really moving and for all people. So check it out and then check out Jeff Hiller's book. And Jeff Hiller, you should listen to this podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah. I went to your show.
Two equally successful content creators.
That's right.
This concludes another segment of Brooke's Books.
Thank you.
Tune in next time to hear Brooke say,
hey.
Sure.
Middlemarch.
Tune in next time to hear Brooke continue to be reading Middlemarch. Today, dear reader, we are mixing it up. This has been an episode in the works for a while. I think it was like the very first idea that you pitched for this podcast before even perhaps we even recorded an episode.
Yeah, before we had a purity ball, before we had Dare to Discipline Ka-chow, before all of it. Yeah.
We were talking about the Duggars. This was your like first touchstone or main touchstone for evangelical culture, yeah?
One of them,
yeah.
Yes. The Crouches were probably my very first, but yes, this is one of them.
Today, and in the next episode, we'll be talking about the Duggars, made most famous for the TV show series 19 Kids and Counting. It actually had a lot of names. It's really hard to shorten it in any way.
Yeah.
But also the culture around them and the ways that pop culture intersects with evangelicalism. Brooke will be taking the lead at this first part, talking about the Duggars primarily from a pop culture standpoint. I actually know very little about this part of their experience. Their show premiered in 2008, which was the year that I moved to Germany. And when I came back, I wasn't watching reality TV anyway. Evangelicals I was around were a lot more into Duck Dynasty, which is a whole separate conversation. Yeah.
Okay.
The Duck Dynasty people are like super Christian.
Oh, okay.
Do you not know this?
No.
Oh my God. Like fame. Oh, wow. We have a lot to talk about. Anyway, I'm excited to learn about this side of the Duggars with you all readers. But Brooke, take it away.
Like I said, I'll just say briefly that like my very first sort of foray into evangelicalism was late college when my friend and I would get kind of stoned at night and be eating pizza, and we wandered across TBN, right? Which is the Trinity Broadcasting Network.
Yes.
And it was just like totally wild to us. And it was, I'm going to say things and people might get offended. And I'm just going to say that, like, I will talk about this later, that I am complicit in some things here. But to us, we had never seen anything like this. And it was like wigs and makeup and golden thrones and televangelism at its highest. And it was just like high camp theater, like performance art for us, right? And we just couldn't get enough of it. And we watched it all the time. We sort of tuned out the Jesus parts, right? Honestly, like we were like, okay, it's about the Bible, I guess. But we were just like, just enthralled with it. Like we just thought it's like the Tammy Faye Baker, like that was her network, I believe, right?
I believe so.
Yeah, and then it went to these people, the Crouches.
Editing Jake here with history and drama you probably didn't need to know and probably don't care about, but we're here anyway. Trinity Broadcasting Network, TBN, was founded in 1973 by Paul and Jan Crouch, along with Jim and Tammy Faye Baker. However, due to some early infighting, Jim and Tammy Faye Baker left and founded Praise the Lord television network, PTL, in 1974.
And so we just would laugh, and we just thought it was like so funny.
Mm-hmm.
It was shocking. I would have to remind myself that there were people who took it seriously.
I was going to say, could you imagine, like, did you have any idea what it would be like to watch that non-ironically?
No, because it was like drag.
Truly.
Right? Like, truly.
Tammy Faye Baker is a drag icon.
Yeah. And like Jan Crouch, like, and even like Paul Crouch, like it was like gold. It was like Liberace, right? Mm-hmm. To me, it just felt like camp, right? Like high camp. And no, I couldn't imagine people at home. And we were doing the same thing with like, in tandem with like Martha Stewart had a TV show on at the same time where it was like, you know, she would balance a baseball hat on her head and like fake paint her house, and we would laugh at this. I mean, this was the heyday of sort of like hate watching, right?
Yeah. So this was, I have a lot of questions about this. Being raised on military bases, evangelical, autistic as well. Like I have not been the most tuned into pop culture, especially as a kid. I didn't really get hate watching as a concept.
Yep.
I understand what it is, but like, what do you get out of it?
So one thing to know about it, I mean, it still exists, but one thing to know is that leaving the 90s and going into the millennium was this period of time that was very like ironic. Everything was ironic. Like you were too cool for everything, right? Mm-hmm. And so it was to like we were laughing at everything, right? And at least in my generation, it was like to prove that you were not taking anything seriously, right? All the time. And so things that were earnest, and that was the word that would be used all the time. Yeah. And again, this wasn't everybody.
Sure.
But I was in college, and I mean, talk about like the worst kind of person. We were like English majors at a private liberal arts college, right? I mean, we were truly like the worst people.
You were truly James Dobson's nightmare.
Yeah, we were, you know. And I mean, we were, you know, at the same time, I mean, we were insufferable. At the same time, we were like, you know, in our friend's basement reading poetry and chain smoking, you know, clove cigarettes. But it was like you had to like take something that was earnest and kind of destroy it, right? Mm-hmm. And blogs were like a brand new thing, and all the blogs were like, let's tear everybody apart, right? Mm-hmm. But be funny about it. So like snark was the word of the day, right? Like everything was not just mean and ironic, but there was like, but it was funny. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of like legitimately funny, but not very nice. But it was done with like what was it, McSweeney's, or like there were a lot of like highbrow websites and stuff with like good writers at the time who were writing things that weren't very nice, but they were very well written and very funny, right? That was kind of the vibe. Right? Sure. And so we were all kind of into that, at least the people around me. I mean, we were assholes, I'm going to be honest, right?
Sure.
But it wasn't just like me and my friend. It was a lot of people.
My understanding, it's a cultural thing. Like this is when like South Park was taking off as well. And South Park is the epitome to me of like, it is uncool to care about anything.
Yes. And we're going to have like these jokes that are extremely inappropriate, extremely sometimes like racist or like ableist or whatever it is, because what we're really saying is that we are so above this, we are so beyond this that we can joke about it, which now we know is like ridiculous, right? But at the time it was like, well, we've solved all of this, so now we can joke about it.
Sure. Right? So 2008.
So this was all starting like late 90s, early aughts.
Yeah.
So by 2008, we have gotten into a ton of reality shows. And a lot of people are not watching reality shows because they legitimately care a lot about the people on the reality shows. They're watching them because they don't care about the people, right? Or because they're kind of hate watching them. It's not a thoughtful, loving thing, right? And this kind of new style of reality show has come out that isn't just like competing to be a model or competing to be a chef. It's like TLC has created this sort of style of reality show. And it started by having these specials, right? So John and Kate plus 8 was one, and then the Duggars was one, and it would just be a one-off thing. And there were a lot of other ones, and these are just the ones that hit. But it would be like, look at this crazy family, right?
Mm-hmm.
This family has quintuplets or sextuplets. This family has 14 kids, or this family has whatever. And it really harkened back to the old days of like freak shows,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where it would be like, look at this. And we still have reality shows like this. Like, look at this really fat lady. Look at this person with gigantism,
Mm-hmm.
which is not what it's called anymore. Look at this woman with a beard, right? Whatever it is. Look at this person with a deformity of some kind, right?
Mm-hmm.
TLC sort of put it in this thing of like, this is the learning
The
channel.
learning channel. Yeah.
This is,
Let us educate you with the diversity of humanity.
yeah, and we're not making fun of them. And they're not winning a prize, and they're not competing. We're just exploring how they live,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we're not exploiting them. We are just seeing them in their natural habitat. Oh, the other one was like Little People, Big World,
Mm-hmm.
which is such a like infantilizing title. I mean, like all of this, right? But what happened was some of these would hit,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think those three were the big ones, like John and Kate plus 8 and Duggars, which I think originally was called like 13 Kids and Counting.
I think it was, I did research into this part.
Uh-huh.
They had 5 1-hour specials before it became a TV show.
Uh-huh.
And it was 14 Kids and Pregnant Again.
Oh,
the
right.
First one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it just kept going.
Mm-hmm.
And then John and Kate was the other one. It was a little different than like the hate watching of the late 90s. And it was a little more of like the freak shows of the early 1900s,
Mm-hmm.
where it was like, yeah, look at this. How do they? Like, how does a family with 14 kids go to Walmart?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how does a family with sextuplets, like, wake up and have breakfast? You know?
Yeah.
So it wasn't really hate watching, but it was a little bit like peek behind the curtain. And let me tell you, nothing happened on these shows.
So for these episodes, I have read some books, but I also watched the documentary Shiny Happy People. And in that, one of the people they interviewed said, like, some people found these shows really comforting because if your biggest worry was how are they going to feed enough people with their tater tot casserole, the stakes are really low and you can be invested, but it's not like high stakes drama.
Right. So, like, John and Kate, it literally was like, we're going to a farm today. And that was the whole episode, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how do you get all these kids to the farm? Although that show, there was like an underlying, like, something's up between
Mhm.
John and Kate. And I think everybody was kind of watching that piece of it a lot, right? Little People, Big World was like, how does this family with a mix of like some people who have dwarfism and some people who don't run their lives, right?
Yeah.
But Duggars was simply like, there were a few aspects. One was there's so many people, there's so many
Mhm.
kids in this family. So how do they, same thing as John and Kate, like how do they function? How do they go to the store? How do they go to the zoo? But then there was this other thing, which is like, why are they all dressed like that?
Yeah.
And why do they all talk like that? And what, like, there's some other weird stuff going on with this family. I'm like, what is it? And so there's this kind of mystery of like, and they were real kind of mysterious about it. And they all had their hair the same and they all were real smiley,
Mm-hmm.
but they glossed over it a lot,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, you could tell they were religious.
Sure.
And they would say things like, well, we dress this way because it honors God,
Mm.
right? But that was it. I don't even think they really talked a lot about like Jesus
Interesting.
or like specifically. You never really saw them like going into church or like pray. Like, it was not much different than you might see from like John and Kate, who were also religious, but a little more like mainstream religious,
Yeah.
right?
So interesting. In a lot of the Duggar content, they said they chose to take on the show because it was a ministry and they could like preach Christ to people through the reality TV show.
Which was a little bullshitty because
That's what I'm hearing. Yeah.
they were clearly religious,
Mm-hmm.
but I never heard like, you never saw them like inside that evangelical church. Like, I mean, Sure, there was some like Josh gets married, and the Jim Bob, the dad, is like, well, son, like now you're gonna, have sex for the first time. Like there's stuff like that you're like, wow, this is wild. They did homeschooling, so you saw some of that. Michelle talked like this, and she certainly talked like it was like a Sunday school teacher.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess, yes, you realize that they were very religious. There was a lot of talk about modesty and modesty blouses and not, tempting the men folk and that kind of stuff. But it really felt like you were watching like prairie people. Like, I don't.
Yeah.
But I don't remember feeling. And then they had like a cousin Amy, and she would come in every once in a while, and she would sort of be like the eyes of like the audience, right?
Interesting.
And she wasn't like them.
Yeah.
Like she wore pants.
She was interviewed pretty extensively in Shiny Happy People.
Yes. And she would come in and kind of roll her eyes at all of it and be like, oh God, like I'm not like this at all, blah, blah. And so like you kind of had this sense of like TLC is running this, not the Duggars. I don't know how to explain it. Like, or the way it was edited, you felt a little in on, I don't know, I did anyway. I felt a little in on the fact that it was a lot.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't edited so that it would be like a thing you could take to try to get someone to join the church.
Yeah.
It was edited in a way that was like, look at this freak show.
Yeah. So
I think,
like I said, I grew up kind of removed from pop culture a bit. The first reality TV show I watched, I think, would be The Amazing Race. And then I basically didn't watch reality TV until I started watching RuPaul's Drag Race when I came out in high school. And between being far too into RuPaul's Drag Race, and especially doing this, I've become very aware that the editor is like a whole character.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? In these episodes, sometimes be like, hello, editing Jake here. It's like a whole separate thing.
Yeah.
I try to keep our conversations pretty faithful to what it was, but like theoretically, I could make us say whatever in the edit. And the edit really controls how it's seen and perceived. And from what I've seen now as an adult, like looking back on Duggar content, like the edit is in on the joke.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
The Duggars are earnest, the edit is not.
Oh, right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, have you ever been to the taping of like I went to the taping of America's Got Talent.
Oh, okay.
I went to that once a long, long time ago. And before anyone ever went on stage, they were like, audience, let's see your like happiest clapping. Like somebody just like the most exciting part, like a celebrity's on stage. Like we went through all of that before anyone was even out there. Like, oh, let's see someone you really love just got booed. Oh no, make a sad face. Like it's all controlled, right? And I think we kind of forget that sometimes.
Yeah.
I remember one time seeing a reality show, and it was like, I used to be in theater, and like a friend of mine was on it, kind of a one-off reality show. And I was like, oh my God. And I texted her. I was like, did you get married? You're on this reality show. She's like, no, I'm an actor. Like, what the hell? Why are you believing a reality show? I was like, oh my God. They're all fake.
I am so gay. This is a big thing in RuPaul's Drag Race as well. Right, a lot of the Drag Race girls will come to Roscoe's, the bar here in Chicago, and they'll do like interviews and be on stage during the episodes that are aired. And like, yeah, so the thing that you saw, that didn't happen then. We actually recorded our verses before we even got to the studio.
Right.
We had to pretend like it's reality TV is not reality.
Right. Remember that anyone whose face is on television had to sign a waiver saying that their face can be on television. So like, if you see a reality show in a restaurant and there's people eating in that restaurant, they had to sign a waiver. So like most of those people were hired, and most of that filming took hours and hours to film. So like the Real Housewives, all that stuff, like a lot of that is scripted, or it took a day to film that whole scene, all of that stuff. But people know this. But all to say, with the Duggars, like they're sort of encouraged and like led and like,
How aware were you of kind of that discrepancy when you were watching them back in the day? Like, yeah, they believe this, but also it's put on.
Well, what I was aware of is that they were children and they were just going to say whatever they were told to say. I was aware that there were more than 2 adults in the house with them because they're a reality show. And they moved, at one point they lived in like a house and then they moved into like a compound, right? Which is also what John and Kate did. And I think is also what Little People Big World did with TLC, because they have to basically have the film crew like move in at a certain point, right? And so they go from living in just a house to living in like a studio, basically, right? And the kids just, they're in this place with all these people. And, they didn't look like kids. They looked like little, that's why it's called shiny, happy people, right? They just looked like, we've been told to smile, and we've been told, like, they were sort of like trained.
Yeah.
Right? And
which they were.
They were. And you can see this happen, I think, more clearly. I didn't realize I was going to talk about John and Kate so much, but you can see this happen a little bit more clearly with the John and Kate kids, who are like more like real kids. Like they're just kind of like, wow, like because some of them were a little older. There's 2 older ones when that started.
Yeah.
And they're just like kids that are running around. And then you see them get a little more media trained as it goes along. But the Duggar kids, I think, would be like this anyway to some extent, because they grew up in
kids. A high control authoritarian cult.
Yes. Yeah. And then you see them like courting, and that was wild because that courting thing is weird.
Part of purity culture.
Yeah, that's where I started to hear some of that, right? They're only allowed to like side hug and that whole thing. But it sort of feels like they wanted to show us their lifestyle, but only really like the nicest, cleanest, best parts of it. I could tell there was a lot I wasn't being shown. Like they would never show spanking. It was all just very nice.
What understanding of their religious beliefs did you have while you were watching it?
I understood that they were very religious Christians. That they were modest about their clothes. That they were extremists about that. But I never heard anything about quiverful, which I learned later. I never heard that. I never heard anything about focus on the family. I don't even think I heard like evangelical. I never heard anything about Jim Bob's like political stuff.
Really?
Yeah.
That's so interesting to me.
I think maybe they were sort of like referenced it casually, but
sure.
No, it was very much like,
I guess because it would have been like controversial, quote unquote. They like don't want to talk about like political stuff.
I mean, you have to understand these shows were so boring. It was like ASMR. I
think that's a really good comparison, actually.
Yeah.
Like that from, again, I was not there, I was not involved. From my understanding, it would be like kind of background TV.
Yes.
Like
it literally, like, it would be like Michelle in the pantry, and she'd be like, this is where we keep the pasta, and here's 9 boxes of pasta. And the kids love to have that. And then we also have jelly. I mean, it was like, they were nothing burgers, right? And like every once in a while they would like get in the van and go to the store. Like nothing ever happened.
Sure.
There was no drama whatsoever, which is why it was huge. I mean, it was like a ratings bonanza, and it was so bizarre in whatever year it was when John and Kate got divorced. And these go together because it was not too much longer than when the Duggar drama happened.
Sure.
And I think it's what drew a lot of attention to it, because John and Kate had this huge public divorce because they were just 2 actual people. They weren't like, now I think that wouldn't have happened that same way because now everyone is so media trained. But at the time it was like, hello, we're 2 TLC reality parents. Like,
yeah,
no, they weren't on like The Amazing Race or Survivor or something, right? And so they had this big, huge public divorce. The ratings on that episode of television were through the roof for a TLC family thing, right?
I read Counting the Cost, a memoir by Jill Duggar and her husband, Derek Dillard, and they had a writer, Craig Barlays. My apologies to Craig. And they talk about how the highest rated episodes consistently were births and marriages.
Yes.
Which are when things happen.
Right. Yes. Well, so to wrap it all up, kind of, John and Kate get this big public divorce. They try to co-parent. It's so weird. But it brings this huge number of people to TLC, right? And to the other families that have shows, including the Duggars. So now, at least this is my understanding. I could be totally wrong because this is just what I knew at the time.
Yeah.
But now the Duggars, I think, audience grows. And this then shortly after is when we get into all the Josh Duggar stuff, right?
So let's talk about that. Yeah. So from my understanding, 2008 when they first started to 2015 is like pretty more or less the same thing.
Yeah. There was one scandal before Josh Duggar.
Oh, okay.
I think it was before Josh Duggar, which is that Michelle was on baby like 19. Mm-hmm. And there were issues with the delivery or something.
Who was born 3 months premature?
Yes.
Yes.
The last baby.
Mm-hmm.
And and so their whole thing is like natural birth and no birth control.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
And so we'll just keep going until God says it's time to stop, right? Mm-hmm. But then the last baby, there was problems. Mm-hmm. And so there was a big like uprising among people that were like, stop having babies.
Yeah.
Like your body, this is your body telling you to stop having babies. Mm-hmm. Right. And so then there was some like clash. And that was the first kind of scandal with the Duggars.
Interesting.
Of people sort of, not scandal, but people sort of like turning a little against the Duggars. And being like, oh my God, you have 19 kids.
And going from freak show to problematic. Yes. A little bit.
Yes.
So then in 2015, a police report gets released that happened decades ago where Josh Duggar admitted to molesting kids, including some of his own siblings.
Yes.
And around that, the show was canceled and then kind of renewed in a different way. What was that like as an outsider?
It was surprising and not surprising. And that is where I began to feel a level of like complicity, where it was like, well, we made these people famous that were just people, right? And we treated them like a freak show. And not that this has anything to do with his behavior, but it was like, and now we're surprised when this stuff comes out because we, it's like you give these people all this fame, all this money, and then you act surprised when they become tabloid news, right?
Yeah.
There was this response that was like, I can't believe it. They're such a good Christian family. It's like, well, yeah, these things happen in good Christian families. Mm-hmm. And then there was this other response that was like outrage that TLC, that this would happen on TLC. And it's like, it happened way before they were, I don't know. There was a lot. I just started to feel kind of like yuck about the whole thing. Mm-hmm. And then they dragged the girls on to like the news.
I'm really curious.
Yeah.
After this police report got probably illegally released, 2 of Josh's sisters who were identified themselves as victims of his, including Jill, did an interview with Megyn Kelly on Fox News about their experience. And
did you watch it?
Did you watch it is my question.
I did.
Did you watch it live?
Yeah.
Wow. What do you remember about it?
I remember being really pissed because they were clearly trained. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was so clear. And what were they going to do? Go on and be like, yeah, our brother is a child molester? Like, not in that family, with Megyn Kelly. No, they looked terrified and their parents were sitting right there, I believe. Mm-hmm. And to bring these girls out and make them talk about this experience at all is horrifying. They clearly had been told they had to do this. Yeah. Right? They were clearly uncomfortable. It's, like I said, they're used to sitting around talking about their schoolwork and their pasta and their, flowers. Yeah. And now they're like being dragged onto the news to talk about being molested. Mm-hmm. And having to say things like, we love our brother and he didn't mean it. And, all this stuff and things that they've been told to say to protect him, because that's the most important thing.
And I don't know if this came across in your experience or not, but things that they have been taught to say throughout their entire life.
Yes.
Not just media training for this one specific incident.
Right. And I was really angry because, of course, that happened. Mm. Like, you have a house with 19 kids in it that range from, like, baby to adult, right? And full of teenagers and preteens and kids. And you have 2 parents who are filming a reality show most of the time. Mm-hmm. And you are expecting your older kids to raise your younger kids and to educate your younger kids. And like, who's really parenting anyone?
Yeah. This is another question I have for you. I want to talk to you now as an adult, or not
Mhm.
as an adult, you were an adult then, but like
Yeah.
you as your more evolved adult.
Mm-hmm.
Is this child abuse? To have this many kids, to I'll say pawn off the responsibilities of parenting, right? Famously, the Duggars had a buddy system where once the kid was no longer breastfeeding, essentially, one of the older siblings was in charge of raising one of the younger siblings.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not saying like file police reports, whatever, but just in general, like, how do you feel about that?
Complicated.
Yeah.
I would say that I can't say that having lots of kids is child abuse, right? I'm sure there are families with lots of kids who are fully loved and taken care of,
Sure.
right? I think putting your children on television and exploiting them from the time they're born
Yes.
through their whole life is a type of child abuse.
Yeah.
And I haven't read it, but there is a book called Childism that I would like to read that is all about exploiting kids. And I think, like, now we're looking at, like, Ruby Franke and all these people that are doing it through YouTube and getting around, like, child labor laws and all that stuff. And reality shows are another way of doing that, because even having your kid, like, in movies and television, at least there's, like, laws and stuff to try to protect them.
Some kind of protection,
There's something
even
there,
as
at least.
terrible and flawed
Yeah.
as it is. Yeah.
But I think, like, the financial abuse, and clearly the Duggars, and you'll probably get into that because I'm sure you researched it, but the financial abuse that happened for those kids is wild.
Yeah.
And I don't know, the exploitation is hard. And it's sort of like, is that a genuine childhood? I mean, I guess on the one hand, they got to do some stuff that other kids don't get to do. That's cool. But, like, I don't know. It feels that the part of it where you are on television and you live in this strange house with all these film crews and you're being watched and surveilled constantly.
Yeah.
That part feels abusive. I think that the part you're talking about, though, of kids raising kids, abusive is a hard word and
Sure.
a controversial word, but I feel like it is inappropriate.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I work with a lot of clients who grew up in a house with, like, 3 or 4 kids where they had to do a certain amount of that and not even at the same level. And it was hard.
Yeah.
You know?
I think there's a lot of... The Duggars were problematic in a number of ways, which is the coldest take to ever exist. I think we'll talk a lot about, like, the financial abuse part of it, but absolutely they were exploited as reality TV stars, as kids who had no agency over what was filmed, how it was filmed, how much money they got paid for it, right? A lot of Jill Duggar's book, Counting the Cost, is spent talking about how she didn't get any money from the show for the longest time because her dad intercepted all of it.
Right.
And then when she did get some kind of money, it came with all these strings attached, and he was really using it to extort her. These are my words. And, like, founding principle that I try to live my life, practice therapy, and do the show about is there's infinite ways to live life happy and successful. And so having a lot of children under one roof is not inherently, I think, abusive. I do think as horrible as the reality TV show was for them, and I do think very much it was exploitative, in some ways it helped prevent it from becoming abusive or neglectful. A big part of the reason why they were able to afford their lifestyle, and not just, like, going on trips, but, like, having food or having a house that was big enough for all of them, was because of the money that came in from TLC. And I think a really important factor in deciding is this abusive or neglectful or whatever is, like, are you able to have your basic needs met? And they were, but not because of Jim Bob's ability to sell cars or whatever his job was beforehand. In her book, Jill Duggar talks pretty positively about her experience in childhood, especially growing up with that many kids. She liked being a buddy for a younger sibling. She felt included and involved. And so it is not my job to tell someone about their experience. She does not experience that as abusive or neglectful. I'm not here to say retroactively, yes, it was. I think it is incredibly risky. There's a lot of danger and potential for abuse and neglect that happens in situations like this. And I especially think when you add in the additional element of the theology that undergirds it, they're going to talk about in a bit, it's just ripe for abuse and neglect. 2015, this police report comes out. How tapped into that were you?
I mean, it was huge.
Yeah.
It was everywhere. Because by this point, everyone knew who the Duggars were. I mean, in 2008, I don't think everyone did.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was like, oh yeah, there's that show about those people with all the kids.
Yeah.
But I think, again, thanks to the Goslings and John and Kate and TLC had kind of blown up by this point, and then people were tapped into the Duggars. And so by 2015, everyone knew who Josh Duggar was.
Yeah.
And this report came out, and I think it was everywhere, and people were unsurprised or surprised or whatever. And people were angry about it, you know? And they were angry at these girls being paraded around, or what felt like them being paraded around. And I think they were angry because there didn't seem to be a lot of repercussions, or like nothing happened originally.
Sure. So 2015 happens, and then the show gets rebooted, essentially.
Yeah.
They drop the how many kids and counting, and they shifted to counting on, following Jill and Jessa, two of the older girls.
I think that had to do with Josh, and also with not highlighting Michelle having more babies.
Interesting. What do you think that second part?
Well, because it was controversial. It became controversial that she had so many babies.
Gotcha. Did you watch Counting On at all?
No, at that point I was starting to feel icky about it.
Sure. Do you know anything about the events of Counting On, or?
It was like the older ones were starting to get married, right?
Yeah.
And then they were starting to have their own families. Is that what it was?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is also kind of fun to understand the general media engagement with it, where it's like they had another show and it still made money, but like was kind of decreasing.
Yeah.
Jill was married in and around this time, and her husband were missionaries. And so from my understanding, a lot of the show is following them and their adventures in the global south, we'll say. And yeah, just kind of proceeded more or less as normal, different branding, slightly different focus, but more or less the same thing.
I got the vibe that people were a little off the Duggars at this point.
Yeah.
Because of Josh.
So 2015 in my life was the year that I came out. I was in high school, and I was only like vaguely aware in some part in the back of my mind that this is what was going on. Again, the people I was around, the evangelicals around, were much more interested in Duck Dynasty, because I think for as outrageous and how much of a freak show the Duck Dynasty was, they're also more regular, right? Like they don't have 1,000 kids.
Right.
They were also a little bit more explicit about their faith. They ended every episode pretty much with a prayer.
Oh, interesting.
It said Jesus' name.
Am I right about that? Tell me if I'm right about that. I think like on the Duggars, I mean, maybe they said Jesus, but it wasn't like prayer time.
Yeah.
But correct me if I'm wrong, I guess. People.
And then the show Counting On happened for a while still, and it basically only got canceled in 2019 with the reemergence of Josh Duggar new allegations.
Yes.
What was that like for you as a person who had previously been invested, kind of fell off, and all of a sudden they're back in the news for this?
The new allegations, because there was Ashley Madison, right?
Yes.
So that was like, whatever. Because we all knew he was gross, and...
Ashley Madison, the website, that's tagline was, "Life short, have an affair."
Yes. And he was part of that. There were other people that were part of that. I think that wasn't, it's like molesting his sisters is different than having an affair on Ashley Madison.
Sure.
So I think at that point he just had become like a punchline, right? So that happened, and it was like, oh, of course, this guy is so gross, and like no one wanted anything to do with him, Actually, that's when I first kind of learned about like focus on the family.
Really?
Yeah, because people were like, oh, he's from Ashley Madison, but he's also focused on the family. And I was like, what the hell is focused on the family?
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
He explicitly wasn't focused on the family. We're going to talk about this more. It's really but I understand why people would conflate the things. And he was involved in other James Dobson projects.
Oh, interesting.
But that's interesting to me that that's when you first started learning about it.
Yeah. And then, but the real thing was, it was his child porn stuff, right?
Yes.
But was that shortly after?
It was around the same time.
Okay.
Yeah, so...
The Ashley Madison stuff, I was like, oh, whatever. I mean, he's gross.
Yeah.
The child porn stuff was really harrowing.
In around 2019, the Department of Homeland Security raided Josh Duggar's used car lot, because he was a used car salesman.
Ugh.
At the initial investigation, before Josh Duggar admitted guilt, he said, "What's going on?" They said, we're here to talk about a computer. He said, what has someone been downloading child porn?
Oh, right.
Which is like, wow. Like, I don't think you should try to hide at that point and confess to your sins and face the punishment, but like, you are not subtle, my dude.
Why were they investigating him? Like, who tipped them off?
I believe, I don't know all the details of the case. From the very limited understanding I have, just they're constantly trying to track what child porn is, and they have like different flags for things. Importantly, Josh Duggar had Covenant Eyes, which is one of the computer programs similar to the thing. It might be the exact same one that Speaker of the House Mike Johnson has with his kids, where it monitors all of your internet history, and if you go to a porn site, it will send an email report to your accountability partner. But Josh Duggar knew how to get around that. So his hard drive had half for business and the like good Christian image, and half full of just horrible child sexual abuse material.
Oh God. Did you ever see his wife and just like how exhausted she looks from life with him?
I've only seen clips, and only recently. So I watched the documentary Shiny Happy People. That was the first time I'd ever actually like heard the Duggars talk in any like real focused way that I was paying attention to. So they have some clips of Anna Duggar there, Josh Duggar's wife. Why do you think she stayed with him so long? Like, knowing all of this.
Because I think she grew up in that same exact, with the same exact religion and values that he did.
Yeah.
And everything we've talked about on this podcast, I think there's no choice. She has his kids, lots of them. Mm-hmm. They all have M names from Michelle.
Really?
Yep.
Oh my God.
She has like 7 of them, I think. Mm-hmm. And what is she going to do? Mm-hmm. Right? And he's famous, right? Yeah. He's Josh Duggar. So what is her life? I mean, she can't get a divorce. Mm-hmm. What other choice does she have, right?
And readers, I hope that you trust us enough to know this, but to say it explicitly, we're not trying to victim blame. We're not like, oh my God, what's her problem? Really, it's like trying to understand how this culture functions and traps people in these really abusive relationships.
Absolutely. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, yeah. I don't know that she's probably very protected in the position that she's in right now. She has her family. Mm-hmm. She has his family, right? I don't know what her life would look like otherwise.
Yeah, I don't think that she knows. And I also, this was brought up in Shiny Happy People, so this is not an original thought of mine. I don't know that she knows what resources would exist to help her get out of such a situation, even if she wanted to.
Right.
That happens in 2019. It is truly one of the worst things a person can do. The trial happens in 2020. What is your understanding of where the Duggars are at now?
Like scrambling.
Scrambling. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Because I don't know if you found this in your research, like so much starts to fall apart for them. Mm. So that happens to Josh. Jana gets the police called on Jana because she's started a daycare and like one of the kids is wandering around or something.
I didn't know this. No.
Yeah. So the police get called on Jana. She's the oldest one and the only unmarried. She's the oldest girl and the only unmarried girl. Uh-huh. Girl. Well, who's not a minor.
Sure.
And then she quickly got married after that. It was interesting.
Uh-huh.
And then Jill and I think Ginger start like being like, hey, we're starting to question some of this stuff.
Yeah.
And they start writing books and asking for their money and getting their noses pierced and wearing pants. Mm-hmm. And a lot of stuff starts going down.
It is really interesting to me how this is specifically a thing I found for like AFAB, assigned female at birth, women who grew up really fundamentalist, how getting your nose pierced, specifically a nose piercing, is like both such an act of rebellion, but also like reclamation of autonomy.
Yeah.
And like, love nose piercings. Go off, sis, love that for you. But like that is such a recurring thing as like, when I do this, I'm breaking such taboo. That's like...
It's kind of a thing across the board, actually.
Really?
Yeah, I didn't get my nose pierced until I was like until I was over 40, honestly. Because it's a thing that's like, I deeply don't care what you think about my face anymore. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm all for me.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Humans are really tapped into the human face. Like, we notice the minorest of like twinges and expressions that happen there. So to say like, I don't care what you think about this, I think is a really significant statement.
Yeah.
We are coming to the end of this episode.
Whoa.
I know.
This was fun.
It's been an hour already.
But we didn't even laugh. This was very serious.
I have a couple questions for you on a more related to the topic of this podcast. What do you understand the relationship between the world of the Duggars and James Dobson to be?
Now, I think it's very connected,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, so that's why I've brought them up so much when we've been doing this podcast, because now I see a lot of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like purity culture, or all the stuff about parenting, right? This homeschooling and this fear of public school and this fear of strong-willed children and spanking and all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
And even the idea of the umbrella and the dad being at the top and all of that, right? I mean, it's so clear. I don't know actually what their relationship to James Dobson is. I'm sure they're fans. But, and I don't actually, I know Quiverful is just have lots of kids. But I don't know exactly what their James Dobson connection is. But they seem to fit right into a lot of his beliefs. I'm sure he would like them.
Sure.
They seem even more strict than he is.
Sure.
Yeah.
We'll talk a lot more about this next episode, but there is no official connection between them. There's a lot of really clear implicit connections.
Okay.
And I think you are absolutely correct that the worldview that they share and James Dobson shares is, if you're looking at a Venn diagram, it's basically a circle.
Yeah.
Like, there might be like one or two things that James Dobson's like, no, don't have that many kids or what have you. But like, it's really, really similar.
I think the one thing I would say as we end this, from my perspective, is like, I'm glad that we have moved away from that like snarky hate watch that we used to do. I mean, people still do a certain amount of it, but like, I'm glad we have collectively decided like, hey, let's not like do this to people anymore in the same way, because it never seemed to end very well, you know? But it always comes back around in some way. Like the freak show comes back around.
Yeah.
And people are always really hurt by it. And it's amazing to me that as somebody who is like I am a fat person, I am a person with disabilities that literally would be in a freak show, right? In the 1900s, that I am still complicit in these things when they come back around, right? And I am always like amazed by how much we all as a society engage in that, you know, and still do sometimes.
When we've been talking about doing this episode, you've talked about framing it as, at least partly through the lens of like what freak show means in culture. And one of the things that I've really been struck by as I've learned a lot of history as an adult is that like pretty much throughout time, humans haven't changed all that much.
Right.
And so we've always been fascinated with people who feel different or othered and trying to understand that difference, but also in some ways finding it threatening and trying to demean people who we find as different. These freak shows connected to pop culture, and especially like the Duggars now, makes a lot of sense. I think it's really spot on. And how do I want to say? I am cringe, but I am free. Right? Like it is in some ways cringy to feel things deeply and be really earnest. And what I've been really not heartened by, something that I'm like really struck by is how, right, like it's kind of a cliche on RuPaul's Drag Race now that it's like every episode they got to talk about something heavy, and they do a thing where they hold up a picture of them as a child and it's like, what would you say to like your 3-year-old self? And it's a little bit cheesy, but also like, I think that's meaningful.
Yes.
I think it's good and important. And I'd much rather that than haha slur. It's funny because I said a slur.
That's right. I mean, reality shows have always been, and like, don't ever be fooled. Like they have always been the freak show, right? Like Biggest Loser, right? Which was really just like, let's look at these fat people. It's framed as like, it's health.
And
right?
which it explicitly is not.
It explicitly was not, right? It was very much not that. And all these things are like what the 2,000-pound sisters or whatever that stuff is, you know, and it's just, it's all, but we're mesmerized by it, you know? And I'm like, look, I'm still watching reality shows. Like, I'm not a, you know, but I find that I am more drawn to the people who are a little more earnest and a little more just like going in and like, like on Drag Race and stuff and just like being their actual authentic self and like how sort of cool that is and how much I actually admire that now.
The last like somewhat serious question I have is like, how do you think the experience you had watching the Duggars informed your understanding of evangelicalism?
I don't know that it did.
Okay.
Like when I watched Shiny Happy People and they said we thought we were doing missionary work, I was surprised because it did not feel, well, it certainly didn't feel to me like I would ever be like, oh, I certainly should think about this, right? But it would never was going to hit me that way. But I would have been, I guess, I would have been surprised that if someone who wasn't already a religious person would have found God through the Duggars.
Yeah.
I don't really know. I don't know. Maybe somebody would have felt like, oh, I guess I should have 19 kids. I don't know. Like,
yeah.
I don't know what people would have found because it didn't really show church. I mean, unless I'm not remembering that right.
I mean, the fact that you don't remember it, I think itself is meaningful. Whether or not the actual show did, like clearly what the Duggars thought they were doing is not what was conveyed to
what I think it could have conveyed is that if you have a gimmick, you can get on TV. You know what I mean? And that you don't have to even do that much, but that if you have something like a big family or a big family full of modest people with long hair or whatever, you can have a TV show.
The other reason that I think the framing of it as a freak show is really powerful is that it feeds into the evangelical persecution complex. I think to some degree they're aware that a little bit of a joke is being played on them. They're being made fun of a little bit.
Yes.
And that is all the more reason to think, well, now we're doing the righteous thing.
Right. I mean, I would be surprised because Jim and Michelle, they did not seem like unintelligent people, right? I mean, for all the stuff that felt so silly, like they did not seem like they were fools, right? And so there were times where I was like, they know what's up. TLC isn't like, oh my God, we just love evangelicals and we are here to really promote the church. TLC wanted to make a buck, right? And I'm sure that they were nice people and that they all had a nice time. But like Jim and Michelle had TLC camera crews in their house 24 hours a day. I'm sure they joked around. I'm sure that they hung out. You know what I mean? Like Jim and Michelle were making money too, right? So it's like everybody was there to make money, you know? And so they were all kind of working, in my opinion, they had to have been all kind of working a little bit together. Like Michelle would know what to say and how to say it in her voice and how to turn it on for the cameras. You know, everyone was in on it, except little kids.
Yeah. What do you think the pop culture legacy of the Duggars is?
I think because of Josh, it is unfortunate. I think that it is smirched. Like, I think it could have been like, oh my God, there was this family, there was a million kids, and it was this weird time in 28 to 15 where we were obsessed with huge families, and this was this ultra Christian family. But because of what happened with Josh, and frankly, Michelle, and like too many kids, and the fact that they became adults and were like, we didn't love it, you know, and like some other stuff. I mean, the kids grow up and start talking. And I think what happened is everyone like me who was watching it started to say like, ugh, like, what were we watching actually? And why? And how do we feel about that?
I had written, this is one of my only notes for this part of the episode. I had written down freak show that devolved into a tragedy.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. And I think when you and I talked about it, I was sort of like, yeah, it was like this kind of funny thing to sort of hate watch and then just watch. And then the Josh Duggar scandal came out, and it was this big scandal that you would watch on the news and be like, did you hear about this? And what happened? And blah, blah, blah. And then it became just kind of like sad. And then you didn't really want to talk about it or hear about it anymore, you know? And that's when that feeling of like complicity came in. That was like, what are we doing?
Yeah. I have two last questions. One, which we will really pick up next time. What does the name Bill Gothard mean to you?
Oh, they talked about him.
Uh-huh.
He's like the head of their...
He's their James Dobson.
Yeah, he's their Jimmy D, right?
Yeah.
I hate Bill Gothard.
Oh boy, do I hate Bill Gothard. We're going to get to that.
That'll be our new podcast.
I feel like Shiny Happy People did that pretty well.
Yeah, I only know about him from that documentary, and I don't remember exactly, but he's like Jim. He's like Jim Dobson adjacent, right?
Get ready to hear a lot about Bill Gothard next time. And then finally, just as like a fun little treat to help us not end in depression, can you name all the Duggar kids?
Yeah. Okay, ready?
Uh-huh.
Dad, Jim Bob.
Uh-huh.
Mom, Michelle.
Yes.
Here we go. They may not be in order.
That's fine.
Here we go. Josh, gross.
Uh-huh.
Jana.
Uh-huh.
Jeremiah.
Yes.
Jedediah.
Uh-huh.
Jessa.
Uh-huh.
Ginger with a J.
Uh-huh.
Way earlier than you think. Jill.
Uh-huh.
Joy.
Yep, Joanna.
Yeah, Joyanna, but then there's also Joanna. No, wait. There's a Joanna. There's two that sound really similar.
Mm-hmm.
There's Joyanna.
And there's a Joanna. Johanna.
Johanna and Joyanna, right? Is that right?
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
Joyanna and Johanna.
Yes.
Wild. Okay.
It's child abuse just to have the names that close to each other.
There's a Jordan.
There's a Jordan.
With a Y.
Jordan Grace.
Yeah. There's a Jennifer.
Yes.
But not till the very end.
Yes.
Which is weird. And then there is... How many am I missing?
A bunch.
Okay, wait. I got Jason.
Yes.
Jackson.
No. Oh, yes. Yes.
How many am I missing?
1, 2, 3.
Jeremy.
No.
There's not a Jacob, right?
There's not a Jacob. Thank God.
That's so weird. Okay. Did I say all the girls?
No. Almost, but not quite.
Damn it. Okay. Who did I miss?
Okay. We got Josh Duggar, Jana, John David.
John David, damn it.
Jill, Jessa, Ginger, Joseph. Josiah. Joanna, Jedediah, Jeremiah, Jason, James. Justin, Jackson.
I said Jackson.
Johanna, Jennifer, Jordan Grace, and Josie.
I was pretty close.
You were pretty close. That is more than I could have got.
And Josepha. If you had to be a Duggar, what would you... Well, your name is Jake.
I'm honestly a little bit surprised they haven't done a Jacob.
How could they not have a Jacob?
Especially like biblical. Like Jacob is such a biblical name. Jacob literally means Israel.
Here's my question, and I'm not even kidding.
Mm-hmm.
And I want some answers. Readers, I want answers. What number is she? What number is Ginger with a J?
Oh, I know the answer to this.
She's like 4 or 5, right?
Mm-hmm. She is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
6. Okay. They have 19 kids. All J names. How did they get to Ginger with a J so quickly?
I wonder if it's like a family name?
A family name? Ginger with a J?
I don't know. I also am baffled, right?
Like before Jennifer or Josie or Jordan or...
Josie feels like such an obvious, like...
Joy?
Right.
They had Joy Hannah and Johanna before Ginger.
Yeah.
I mean after Ginger.
They had Jennifer. Jennifer is one of the last ones.
I know that's so, but that's because it's like not anything of a Bible name.
Yeah. Now there's Ginger.
I know, but give me a break.
Brooke, any last thoughts about the Duggars before we depart for today?
I don't hate the Duggars. I feel sad for the Duggars.
I hate Jim Bob.
I hate Josh Duggar.
I hate Josh Duggar.
Let's be clear.
Yeah.
And
the rest of them,
I kind of hate Jim Bob Duggar.
I have complicated feelings about Michelle.
I have complicated feelings about Michelle, but I did laugh when she wore pants for the first time recently.
She did?
Oh yeah, it's a big deal.
Good for her.
Yeah, one of the older girls posted a picture of her wearing pants, and she looked so scandalized and excited. Like, put those pants on, bitch.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. But I like those older girls for the most part. They are all having babies now. The babies all have wild names. But here's my other question, and listen, I'm not trying to say anything. Don't come for me, readers. But you got 19 kids, 19 human beings. You put any 19 human beings in a room together. There's some gays in there.
You've been so consistent about this.
There's some gays in there.
Before we started recording, or no, during the recording, I've cut it. You told me which ones you think are gay.
There's some gays in there.
Statistically, there has to be.
Statistically, 19 people.
Mm-hmm.
There's got to be at least 2.
That's what the statistics would bear out.
I know who they are, too.
And readers, you will have to speculate.
No, don't speculate.
No.
Not in the month of Pride.
No. In the month of Pride, we're all gay.
Yeah, that's right.
I was, again, not super familiar with the Duggars. I was a lot more familiar with like the theological underpinnings that went into them. To take this time and research them for this episode and to talk with you about it has been
was nice.
Really interesting.
Yeah.
I also don't feel like I missed out that much on pop culture.
I'm kind of jealous of your upbringing now, actually.
Maybe there's something to not having a TV. Anyway, readers, take care of yourselves. And remember, I hate James Dobson.
I hate James Dobson. I hate Josh Duggar. I hate Jim Bob Duggar.
I hate Bill Gothard. We'll get to that, but what a dick.
Yeah. But you know who I love? You. And you know who else? Bisexuals.
That's orgies.
Orgies.
Boyfriend does a really good impersonation of that.
He does.
Yeah.
We gotta record it sometime.
I might put it as a tag at the end of this if you get back in time.
Bye, friends. Thanks for listening to me talk.
I Hate James Dobson is a labor of love, of spite. Written, recorded, edited, and produced by me, Jake. In this venture, I am honored to be joined by my amazing co-host, Brooke. If you're enjoying the show, please consider rating and reviewing it. And if you want to connect with us more, you can find us on Blue Sky, Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, TikTok, and YouTube at I Hate James Dobson, and somehow still on Twitter at IHateJDobs. You can also email us at IHateJamesDobson@gmail.com. We have merch available at IHateJamesDobson.printful.me or on our website, IHateJamesDobson.com. Our theme music is by Mood Maze and the song is called Trendsetter. Special thanks, as always, to Drew, Lindsay, DJ, Jack, and Gary. And thank you, readers, for enjoying our show.
Bisexuals. That's orgies.
Perfect.